Welcome back, everybody. Today, again, with our friend and colleague, Stanislav Krapivnik. Stas, welcome back.
Thank you. Always a pleasure.
Great having you here. We want to talk about Russia mainly today and about some of the things that we've heard from the Kremlin. For instance, the speaker of the Kremlin, Mr. Peskov, actually said that the Russia would consider a ceasefire if the Ukrainians withdraw from the Donbass, from the few positions that they're still holding. At the same time, we hear from the Europeans now and from the West, from the United States as well, in several media outlets, that Russia is basically on standstill, hasn't advanced, and the momentum is gone. There seems to be a new narrative being built up. What do you make out of this, and where do you think that Russia is actually is wanting to take this now 4 years into the war?
Well, first of all, the narrative. They just haven't finished the narrative. If you look at the narrative in 23 and 24 and 25, surprisingly in 26, narrative that pops around March and into April is this exact same, almost word for word narrative. Russia stalled, Russia's economy's collapsed. Well, we're always collapsing. Uh, we're collapsing 24/7. We're collapsing so hard that we just can't collapse.
Well,
It's just like,
Russia's favorite thing to do is like collapsing from morning till evening, like the economy, the Kremlin, everything.
well, you just said it, from morning to evening, and the little dwarfs and gnomes, they come out at night and they build it all back up.
That's how you guys do it.
That's our secret. We've got armies of gnomes. That's right. It's the underpants gnomes from South Park. Uh, yeah. um, the First we steal the underpants, then we get rich. That's step two somehow gets missing. Um,
So dumb. It's just fascinating that for 4 years, I mean, people still write in the New York Times. I read it again today or yesterday. The economy is going slow and it's not working and momentum is gone and collapsing.
I'm gonna make a prediction. I'm gonna make a prediction. We can put money on this if you wish, or you can hold me to it. But come the end of August, Russians will be fleeing from Crimea.
Ah,
About the last 2 weeks of August, all the Russians will be fleeing Crimea, and they will be out of fuel. Well, at least a few very small private gas stations will be out of fuel. There'll be whole lines of Russians fleeing from the southwest.
well, you know what?
Right at the end of tourism season. Every freaking year, they run the same columns. "Oh, the Russians are running. They freaking realize they're running."
What do they add? Wait, do they actually do that? Like tourists leaving Crimea first season and some report that as Russians fleeing? I didn't actually hear that.
Every single year. Yeah. At the end of every August, so this family, and the wife's like, "Oh, I don't wanna leave. This is so great. We had such a great pita. People were so great. I wanna go back." And they cut out everything about the people so great. Like, "I don't wanna leave, but we gotta leave." This cut out this little piece of it. And they use this in the West as propaganda. See, the Russians are running. They're running for their lives every single year. And they always, and because you at the end of August, I know we used to do that too. We said, "Okay, we'll take our vacation earlier and come back with a more sane time." You get massive traffic jams because you get like 5,000,000, 6,000,000 people in their cars heading up the same major interstate. So the small gas stations, the mom and pops gas station, petrol stations, they'll run out of fuel a lot of times because everybody's fueling up. The bigger ones normally don't because they got better logistics. The big chains, but sometimes they do too. Because I mean, when you get that many people in such a short time getting on the road, yeah, you have a tendency of doing that. The main road and then the feeder roads. So 5, 6, 7 million people they'll get on about the same 3 days, right? So you have a massive amount of cars going up. And that's every single year. The Russians are fleeing from the southwest. Any day now, the Ukrainian army is going to conquer Sevastopol. It's like
And probably
every single year, just like they've been. Yeah, they were predicting our collapse, in, like, Time magazine and these other publications since about 1999. So
Yeah, so, okay,
it's
that's the narrative on the one hand, but then on the other hand, we have the realities, and I mean, from what has happened so far, I would just say, like, let's expect that Russia will still be here tomorrow. I think that's kind of reasonable to expect, but what's gonna happen now with Ukraine? I mean, so what's the approach toward, um there needs to be a way to somehow wind it down, right? Russia has no interest in fighting a 30-year war, over there. So where do you see it going?
Well, there are several factions, in the Kremlin. Let's begin with that. Like any government, they everybody prefers to, uh in the West, people prefer, to put a name and a face to any country, any problem, and say that's the whole problem. Well, Russia, like any large society, any large country, has factions within factions. There's still a liberal faction left. It's much reduced, but there's still a liberal faction left that's that wants to play nice with the West and try to come back to like 2012 and other delusional moments like that, for various reasons. Some may have be invested in the West. Some may have children living in the West. Some may just be delusional. Think that, oh, we can just make amends, and bygones and we'll all be friends again. Um, who knows? Some may be on the take. That's one side. You've got a more rationalized neutral party, and then you've got a hardcore party. Um, and I thought I was a bit militant. I thought I was militant, but no. After I watched Karganov's interviews, no, no, I'm actually much more rational than I thought I was. Um,
The in
y-
that interview was pretty hardcore. I mean, I watched it
yeah,
through. It's, like, scary hearing him advocating for, like, nuking Europe, but, yeah, so there is a hardcore faction, yes.
I have said that the Russia needs to strike, and possibly strike into Europe, um, conventionally. And I have said, for example, give NATO 24 hours to close down the base in Poland that's on the border, that's feeding all the equipment and everything in. And if they don't, which they won't, unfortunately, wipe it out. That's your warning shot. That's your shot over the bow. Not hit it once or twice, but wipe it out, fully wipe it out. Look, gentlemen, do you want to proceed? We can proceed from that, but take it in that kind of rational steps. Not don't jump straight to nuclear. The thing is the moment was lost to stop all of this by timidity from Russia back in 22, back when Slovakia gave the first tanks over to Poland. I mean, Poland to Ukraine. Why was it Slovakia that gave the first tanks? Because the collective West kind of pushed Slovakia forward. That way, if Russia was to strike Slovakia hard for that, they would have gone, yeah, the stupid Slovaks. They didn't understand what we said. Don't give them any tanks. And that would have ended that. That was the moment you should have struck. And that would have been the shot across the bow. But when it didn't happen, they went, oh, okay. And the gates of hell opened.
Yeah.
And it just went step by step by step. And we've seen it's going. The problem now is we're quite literally at a choice. I prefer the conventional over the nuclear, of course, but we're at a choice between running down a hill to a conventional war or to a nuclear war. We can maintain the pseudo peace for a bit longer and wind up in a nuclear war, and I'll explain why. It's actually quite logical from a nuclear angle. Look, right now, the modus operandi from the West is mass manufacture of strategic drones, right? Russia right now is for the most part handling anything that's being tossed at it with buffer. Yes, I mean Russia's giant. They find corridors they can get through, and then eventually those corridors get closed. There's also plans right now in building lines of these virtual radar walls where you put up towers. You have a relatively cheap radar system that only looks out about 20 kilometers or 10, 15 kilometers, but every tower is about 15 kilometers out. So they put up these barriers, and you could put them up pretty quickly. Electronics is not that advanced. You don't need it. It's just there to put as a tripwire for anything that's flying through. So you close any venues that where or avenues of approach that the enemy can use for their drones. Yeah, and then you can that gives you the radar signature of anything coming in, and then you can react to it because that's what they're doing right now. Is, they find, like I said, Russia's giant. You'll always when you have the main radar systems, powerful radar systems. There's always some quarter you can find. The U.S. Is doing the finding for the Ukrainians. Let's not think the U.S. is not fully involved. It's quite still is. Well, the problem is you can overload any system if you manufacture enough drones. And their aim is to overload the Russian system and then keep mass manufacture to overload the Russian system. And then what's going to happen? Well, we've seen what happens. As soon as they have an opportunity, they strike the early warning radar systems, and they strike at least the strategic bomber triad of the nuclear deterrence. And I'm sure if they can catch submarines at port, they would try to strike them too. So what you get is you get okay. So except for America, I'm not going to talk about Israel, which officially doesn't have nuclear weapons. Of course, it does, and it has a first strike doctrine for the weapons it doesn't have. But for those countries that actually admit they have nuclear weapons, which everybody else, there's only one country with a first strike doctrine, and that's America. Russia, everybody else, India, Pakistan, everybody has a second strike doctrine. We don't shoot first, we'll shoot second. Well, the point of the first strike doctrine is to strike hard enough not to prevent the enemy from being able to shoot, but to destroy so much of the enemy's capability of shooting that whatever the enemy shoots at you is going to be small enough that you can survive the counter strike and win the nuclear war. And here's the problem, though. If you have a nuclear superpower and an economic superpower that is now blind, and even though it has a second strike capability or second strike doctrine, let me rephrase that, and you have an enemy sitting across that has a first strike doctrine, and you're blind now, so you have no early warning systems. The only logical step you have is to strike first with everything you have. Basically, exterminate the West, because tomorrow or tonight you may be hit and you won't see it coming. And this is when you go into there's only one logical output from this. Nuclear superpowers, by the way, do not lose wars. They exterminate everybody.
Mhm.
That's the logic of nuclear weapons, and that's the logic of great power politics. Now, unfortunate part is the inbreds in Europe uh, can't or won't be able to understand that because that would require doing more than just repeating anti-Russian slogans. So Russia has a choice at this point because the Europeans, the non Russia's 42% of Europe, but the rest there they can't seem to control themselves. They're like little children, not very intellectually advanced children with big toys. And they can't seem to think past, they're so ideologically brainwashed, they can't seem to think past in the next step. Russia has a choice. Either it strikes conventionally at the manufacturing plants in Europe and then risks a conventional war, and so be it, or it waits a few more months. I'm talking by the end of summer, probably, maybe by early fall, and we're in a nuclear war. That's kind of where we've gotten to. That's the point, and the Europeans don't seem to comprehend that.
No, they don't. And I have 2 or 3 points to make on which I would like to get your feedback. The first is more a proposal. Let's call them the EUPians as opposed to the Europeans to which you belong to, because these EU people are like problem, not the continents, not the inhabitants of the continent.
Right.
So
Right.
the The thing though is this war, the way that, I mean, has been raging since 2014. We know that, and the way in its large scale has been raging since 2022 for 4 years. The one thing that we've learned in the 4 years is that whenever the war was about to spill over Ukraine on the EU side, whenever it was dangerous that it was the other direction, into the NATO direction, NATO would like, no, 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 no. Do you remember that episode when this missile came to two Polish farmers and Zelensky said Article 5 now, and then everybody said, like, Zelensky, shut up, shut up. That's not to you for you to say. They shut him up very quickly, and he actually had to apologize. Like, and then it turned out it was actually a Ukrainian missile. So whenever it was actually dangerous that NATO would be under Article 5 obligation, they actually shut it down. To me, that meant that NATO didn't want that. But now, the point is, the lunatics and psychopaths in Brussels and in Washington, this remaining neocon faction that already provoked Russia to the point where they invaded Ukraine, and then they got everything mobilized politically in order to go against them. These people are now thinking in terms of turning Europe into a mega Ukraine, right? And they're actually working on that. They're working on a scenario under which they can claim self-defense, and then everybody go to the front, right? And the Germans gave all of their 18, 19-year-olds, and everybody goes to the Eastern Front, right? So in a sense, yes, what you're saying just makes sense. On the other hand, it actually plays into the hands of those goddamn lunatics and actually gives them the war that they seem to be craving for.
Absolutely. And the point is, Russia is in a position where there, uh, unless the West somehow sobers up, and very, very quickly, Russia doesn't have a choice. You can say whatever, "Oh, they should wait, they should do," but no, they can't, because now we've gotten to the point where it's not just an existential crisis, it is the existential next step. Do we become blind and then wait to be nuked by the Americans, who have a first strike doctrine? I mean, if the Americans had come up with said, "Yeah, we're gonna be civilized instead of, psychopathic, and then we're not gonna do first strike." Yeah, that would calm things down quite a bit. But since, you've got a person like Donald Trump who's already tried to assassinate Vladimir Vladimirovich, let's not, beat around the bush. The Valdai strike, attempted Valdai strike was an assassination. And even in Russia, they're openly saying that now. They didn't want to say that, but, that it is what it is. No matter what conversations are still having, you have an opponent, that doesn't seem to have a break. Uh, Schultz, for anything you want to say, he was much more rational than Merz, as it seems to be, pointing out. And even the EU, sociopaths that are, the EUers that are sitting there, um, some of the more rational, I'm not going to say fully rational, ones have been replaced by even, less rational people like Kaya Kallas, who has an IQ of a broken brick. Uh, and the
Yeah,
the rest have just become that much more indoctrinated and believing their own crap. They're in echo chambers. They all say the same things. They all hear the same things back, and then it builds up in their head
yeah. The
for
problem is,
limited space.
even a broken brick can kill you if it falls on your head iron. So
Yep.
the thing is how to deal with these broken bricks, right? So because, like, the other thing that's going on is that the Europeans are talking again about nuclear umbrellas and whatnot. Although, I mean, is it true, like, that Trump actually said, like, no, 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 we're not going to deploy medium range nuclear missiles? I've heard about that, but I need to verify it. But the French said, well, we could do a French umbrella. And the thing is, and Rainer Rupp, the former East German spy in NATO, actually told me that, look, Pascal, the point about the umbrella always was not to protect what is under the umbrella, but to fight nuclear war on that territory. So it's now, if now all of Germany go like, yay, nuclear umbrella, it means, like, yeah, you will be the place that's already decided there will be tactical nukes coming from both sides and falling on your territory. And they're willing to do that because It's dumb. It's utterly dumb. It's just dumb. But they're willing to go there, and they're building the narrative because again, they believe that tourists who leave Crimea back to home are fleeing Russians. They would believe that the nukes coming from France are nukes coming from Russia, whatnot. I mean, they are. It's that kind of environment by now in Europe. So, what's your point? What's your take?
Well, as your previous guest has said, yes, there were nuclear mines. The U.S. has supposedly dismantled. I don't believe it for a second. The U.S. has nuclear 155 millimeter artillery shells, and those were developed back in the 60s. In the 70s, there was a new one that was developed, replacement shell that was developed in the 80s, and supposedly somewhere in the mid to late 90s was dismantled. I don't believe that for a second. And the second, I mean, we trained, well, I won't say we did any extensive training, but we were briefed and trained on how, in case of a nuclear war, how we're supposed to act. Well, tactical nuclear war. In other words, the tactical nuclear ordnance that's in the 155 millimeter howitzer, the more modern one that has a jet block behind the round to push it further, give it another 20 kilometers distance. And what they would do is, if you had a hardened line of defense, you would shoot that 5 kiloton round into that hardened line of defense, nuke it, and then pump armored forces through that shell, or maybe set off 2, 3, 4 rounds like that, and nuke to destroy a gap, and then you pump armored rounds through it. Well, when you get radiated, you may get radiated. You may not live long enough to worry about being radiated. It's war, but that was the concept, And then the tanks and the armored fighting vehicles, the infantry fighting vehicles, they push through that gap of that freshly nuked area. So yes, it would obviously be on somebody's soil. Russia doesn't have tactical nukes. Okay, well, what Russia calls a tactical nuke, um, Hiroshima was what, about 20 kilotons?
Yeah, 2025.
A Russian tactical nuke is 75 kilotons.
Mm. Wow.
Yeah, that's not really a tactical nuke. That's a theater level, or maybe even already getting toward the edge of strategic level nuclear warhead. I mean, that's 4 times. That's almost 4 times Hiroshima.
No, there's just no way. I mean, this is the one point where I must say, like, whatever. I mean, I completely agree with Vladimir Putin. A nuclear war cannot be won and must never be fought. So it's like, I do understand the enormous amount of frustration, but at this point, like the discussion in Russia, is it really about how to strike and not if, or is there still a discussion of how to create that necessary buffer in Ukraine? Okay, so Donbass is part of Russia and will forever be, and then even Karaganov, I mean, was interesting in the interview. Even he said we don't want Western Ukraine because it's a cesspool of the things that we do want. But there should be some. I mean, you could imagine some neutralized middle part in the ground that at least puts a couple of 100 kilometers between theaters, and then some form of defense that would help Russia to defend against those incoming drones, and a ceasefire, which is basically then a frozen conflict. Is there no concept that it can be kind of de-escalated into a frozen conflict that's just left there for 20 years, but Russia can live?
Well, first of all, just as a step back behind it, the historically speaking, if we're going to look at pre-Mongol medieval Russia, uh, and there's reasons for saying that. Pre-Mongol medieval Russia stretched in the west all the way to Galicia, and in the east all the way to Vladimir, which is 250 kilometers, and Vladimir and Mirm, which are about 250 kilometers east of Moscow. It's this gigantic state. Southern Russia, and southern what today is Ukraine, was actually empty steppe. Well, it wasn't empty. It had nomads running up and down, and then you had Crimea. Russia at one point held different parts of Crimea. For a long time, it held eastern Crimea as part of prior to the Mongols' medieval Russia, and that eventually got taken by the Turks, and then a couple hundred years later got retaken by Russia. But the western portion, because after the Mongols, it had got invaded by the Poles and by the Hungarians, and this hodgepodge mixture came in over 400 or 500 years. They have, while their base, historic base is Russian, they've changed so much over the years with different influx of different people that, whatever. We don't want it. You can have it. Zakarpattia was always Hungarian, which is part of Ukraine right now. Galicia was Russian, but the 1400s, it was pretty much a lost. And by the time it came back into, well, it wasn't ever part of the Russian Empire. When the Russian Empire started expanding, it was still part of the Austro-Hungarian areas. So yeah, nobody really wants that area. It was a big mistake for Stalin to add it. He should have added to the Poles and let them have the headaches. And the Poles want that land, but they don't want to deal with the Western Ukrainians. So, like, they just want the land. They don't want to deal with the Western Ukrainians. Absolutely historical Russian lands is the provinces that go up and down both sides of the Dnieper River. Those are, if you look at the maps on the language breakdowns and the voting breakdowns, those were the ones that voted East. Those are the ones that voted Russian. And that's the ones that were Ukrainianized back in the 1920s. And then the Ukrainians are probably trying to Ukrainianize right now. First and foremost, that's the place that rounded up most of the press gang men in those areas. So to get rid of the Russians that way on the battlefield. So that's the situation there. The problem, well, what you say is not a bad solution necessarily, but the problem too is, one, there's no trust. Because when there was trust of Hollanday, and there was trust of Merkel, we both saw what they did, and they in all glory in 2022, they ran to the media and they laughed and they bragged about how they bamboozled Vladimir Vladimirovich. They were never planning on any kind of peace. When Russia was trying, and Russia was actively at that point trying to keep Ukraine together, minus Crimea, keep the rest of Ukraine together, just as a federalized zone. That's what the big protests in the East were. They wanted this radical concept. They wanted federalization. Where they had a say in their government in Kiev, where they got to elect their own governors instead of having oligarchs placed over them to feed off of them. Little crazy things like that. Federalization. Uh, and in turn, they got terror. So that was back then, and called Minsk One and Minsk Two. And then, that whatever bits of trust that could have been salvaged after all of that, Merkel and Hollanday made sure that it would never happen again. And then following them, you get this whole broad EU or European idiots, this parade of mental midgets that come in there and scream every single day, "We're going to wipe out Russia. We have to defeat Russia. We have to destroy Russia. We have to cut Russia up in pieces." Well, everybody here hears that, and you hear that enough times. For a while you can say, "Well, it's just crap," and they're talking out their posterior. But sooner or later, you start to go, "Well, they say it so often. Maybe they're not. Maybe it's not crap. Maybe it's not internal politics. Maybe they really mean it. And if they want war, they're going to get war. Fine, let's start preparing for war." And that's the push that's coming. And Medvedev, by the way, I was talking to a few people that know him relatively closely. Because the question is, because Medvedev was very liberal, and now he's doing all those posts and he's very warlike. And my question was, is this for real? It's like, oh yeah, he's had an epiphany. He went hard right. So he went from let's play with Europe and be friends with Europe to they want war, we'll give them war. And that's the mentality that set in. Look, I was with RT on stage overlooking Red Square. We were probably about 500 meters away from Red Square on this big hotel, and between us and Red Square was a big park. and we're overlooking the park, and you can see the parade. There's been a lot of criticism on the parade because officially the reason the parade was so small was this is part of mixed signals. What's so small was because we're at war and we need to conserve. Yeah, last year was 80th anniversary, so it had to be big. Well, the criticism is it shouldn't have been small. It should have actually been even bigger because you want to project power. And the parades outside of Moscow in other Russian cities were big. They didn't
Yep.
follow Moscow's lead.
Yeah, but
Uh,
no worries, Stas. Whether big or small, the Europeans wouldn't broadcast it anyhow. They just ignored it. I mean, they ignored the fact that the Soviet Union was part of the Allied powers of the Second World War. I mean, so that one didn't really make it to the news.
yeah. Well, it projects inside of Russia, and I will tell you this, and myself included. I'm not going to lie. Most people were very, 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 very hoping Zelensky would try something
Mm.
because the Kremlin had talked itself into a position that if he tried something, they would have to strike back and strike back literally at the center of power where the elites live in Bankovskaya, which is, by the way, the street is closed by military patrols. I know that from several people there. They only allow, they're afraid of the riffraff, the people of Ukraine. So that's where the elites are. Quite literally, we have drones watching them getting in and out of their cars to their apartments and their offices. So yeah, the overwhelming consent was take it out. For God's sakes, finally, just take it out. So everybody I know was hoping Zelensky would do something. They were just praying Zelensky would finally just try to strike the parade so we could finally do this. That's the mood in Russia. That it's not a mood of we just want peace. It's actually getting much more militant amongst the people. There's two tank armies that are waiting in the wings. And the question is, why aren't they being thrown in? Just crushed the Ukrainians already. And that's the biggest, and this is from, the active duty generals won't say it, but the generals in reserves are saying, in fact, the previous, I cannot remember his name, uh, uh, commanding general, who Gerasimov's predecessor has flat out come out and said, "Why are we fighting like this? Why haven't we done a blitzkrieg on them yet?" I mean, the criticism is getting very, very loud, and the push is getting very, very hard. We've got the troops, we've got the extra troops, we've got the equipment. We're mass producing tanks at about 1,200 new tanks a year. Quite literally, 1,200 new battle tanks a year. It's all being prepared for a big war with Europe if the Europeans started. But we've got the assets, just crush the Ukrainians already and get it over with. We'll take the casualties, fine, but in the long run, you may be even taking less casualties than just having a small amount every single day.
But go where? Go where? I mean, what would be the military solution for Ukraine if nobody wants Galicia?
Kiev.
Yeah, but then you have and then you have Kiev, and then what? And then you still have
Well,
the Ukraine that will keep droning you, and Kiev.
um, true, you'll have a rump Ukraine. I mean, some people are saying all the way to the Polish border. I disagree with that. Once you get a rump Ukraine, a bankrupt, destroyed rump Ukraine, sure, they can still continue droning and you can continue doing missions into it. Just if you want to take it, it's a bad analogy, but if you want to take the Israeli approach, which, by the way, a lot of people are saying, why aren't we doing the Israeli approach?
Oh my God! Please no.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. No, well, not this. I'm not talking about, extermination of the population, but they want to go in there to whack somebody, just go in and whack somebody. Why aren't we doing that? Why aren't we doing the Iranian approach? Iran's destroyed 13 American bases, smacked the U.S. military all over the place, on the head and in the knees and on the face and whatever, was just beating it with a stick. And the U.S. military is going, okay, why aren't we doing that? If the U.S. military can't handle Iran, how the hell are they going to handle the Russian military, which is 5 times bigger?
Yeah, but that's a very legitimate question. On the other hand, it would mean if that's if that became the strategy, it would mean to say like, okay, fine, Article 5 us. I mean, again, as you said,
Exactly.
we're going to take out those bases and now give us your Article 5, show us where it is. But that is a very high gamble, right? Because
It is.
if then decides to go all in, as Alex Christophori usually says, they have no reverse gear, right?
Well, they do have a reverse gear. At least parts of NATO have a reverse gear. All of NATO will never go all in. Let's be realistic. One, the Americans have an incentive to be neutral and sell weapons to the Europeans, not to fight in the European war. And if we're looking at it, the Americans are doing just that. Look, the Stryker Brigade out of Vilsek. I used to be stationed in Vilsek. And then base got expanded quite a bit. It was just 3rd Brigade 1ID there when I was there, or the 3rd Brigade. And now they put in like 2 more brigades. So they really grew that base. But they're going to take 1 brigade, the Stryker Brigade, out. That's 5,000 some men. Now he's like, oh, and we're going to take other men out, and plus men out of Italy. The U.S. is retreating on all fronts because it doesn't want to be part of this war. It wants to feed off of this war.
Yes.
It's got 5,000 M1 and M1A1 tanks in reserve. They need to do something with them. They're mothballed right now, but what are you going to do? Oh, and they suddenly started upgrading the M1s to M1A1s, changing the armor from steel to composite, changing the main gun from 105 to 120, which is great for, by the way, for Rheinmetall, because Rheinmetall produces those 120 millimeter main guns. So, what are you going to do if you, plus you're investing in upgrading? So obviously you're pretty sure you're going to have a market to sell off this older equipment. They've got about 6,000 old Bradleys standing around in mothballs. What are you going to do with them? Either you spend money to chop them up or you sell them to somebody who really, really needs it. And so on. I mean, they even have, Hawk missiles, which went out of the U.S. military, anti-aircraft missiles back in the early, like 91, 92. And they still have hundreds of them, of the platforms and the missiles. Obviously, they're waiting for something, somewhere to sell it because, you've got to maintain it. You've got to spend money on it. Now, having said that, they're just portions of the outside of the Americans. They're portions that will never go fight. The Turks more than likely would never go fight. They have nothing to gain from it. The Greeks will probably have a revolution. So will the Bulgarians. We just saw the elections in Bulgaria. They're definitely not pro. Big question on the Romanians, because let's not forget, the Romanian elections were stolen, flat out. I mean, as ugly as they could be, they were flat out stolen. The only thing that didn't happen was the Praetorian Guard didn't march in there and shoot everybody. Um, and by the way, the Praetorian Guard at that moment was the 110th Airborne. 110th, 101st Airborne, which is Air Assault Division, U.S. Division, which is gone now. So is the 82nd is now gone. They've all been taken out of Europe, and there's steadily they're being taken out because they're not going to fight. Now, questionable how many other European countries are actually going to. Portugal going to send troops, or Spain?
The problem that I'm now realizing, listening to how you're portraying what the thinking also in Russia is that we are much closer on the verge of self-fulfilling prophecy than I thought. Because I thought it was mainly the Germans at the moment that are in war drive and put out all of this stupid stuff. And like on a sociological level, not just on the top, but it's like churches, evangelical churches that get prepared.
Oh, I know. I saw that.
I mean, that just means that, as Matthias Desmond says, that the mass formation has already taken is already gripping. It's like we are well inside COVID hysteria, just this time with war in the one of the most important parts of Europe that would then lead the charge, right? And they're not saying if war happens, they're saying when war happens, right? And if now I take what you were telling me about where Russia is, for real, then Russia is also at the point where they say like, well, we are now believing you that that's where we're going, and why will we be so dumb to keep waiting? Which means Russia is going to do exactly what the Europeans are expecting them to do, which means we are really at a point where a war is close of inevitable out of out of the psychological drive of all parties involved. Plus, you have the warmongers in Washington go like, yeah, let's make a fortune out of it. That's gonna be nice, and BlackRock's gonna own whatever's left on whichever side, and if we don't, then we make a deal with the Russians that we co-own it. It's like
Yep.
Europe is at the verge of being gobbled up, swallowed up, and flattened out on in the process.
Yeah, Russia isn't in a mass formation, because just to understand the Russian mentality, we've been invaded from the West since 1012 AD. This isn't this everyone, oh, Napoleon, Hitler. No, this has been continuous waves of European invasion since 1012 AD. We're just very good at butchering whatever comes in our direction and then following them home, and usually taking a piece back as payment. So while Russians do not want war, if you ask the average Russian, you even ask most Russian politicians, we don't want war. We don't want anything in Europe. We're fighting right now for our historical lands. And past that, what do we want in Europe? Europe has nothing to offer Russia except massive headaches. And no Russian politician saying, "Hey, let's annex Poland, or let's annex Germany. Hey, let's own Paris." Nobody wants them. Nobody wanted them when they were prosperous. Nobody. Well, the Soviets had under Trotsky, anyways, and it stopped under Stalin. Stalin was a nationalist. Trotsky was a globalist. And if everyone's, oh, Stalin was a mistake. Well, in that system, Stalin was the best outcome you could have had. Because if it was Trotsky, one, there wouldn't be many Russians left alive. And there wouldn't be many Europeans left alive because Trotsky believed in global world revolution. Doesn't matter how much you have to pay for it. We're going to have a revolution across the world. And everybody's just a kindling for the big fire of the revolution. So thank God he didn't come to power. Stalin was a nationalist. He built a buffer states in Europe against NATO. Let's not forget, NATO was formed in 49. In 48, Stalin asked to join NATO. He didn't quite get it at that moment that NATO was against Russia or the Soviet Union or Soviet Russia, as Americans prefer to call it. Uh, um, so Stalin was building socialism in one country. That was their slogan toward that that unachievable goal of communism. Um, yeah, that light at the end of the tunnel that for most countries turned out to be a train, not the way out, the oncoming train. Look, I mean, every country in the world to some degree, there's no pure socialist countries. There's no pure capitalist countries. You cannot have one the extreme or the other. You have a mixed economy. That's what almost every single and mixed economies have been around long before people put labels on them. You have state capitalism, which is Russia and many other countries. Even in Roman times, you had a mix of socialism and capitalism mixed in because that's what works. That's the part of they didn't have names for it maybe at that point, but that's what it was. So there's not this economic theological difference. We're fighting communism, something like that, or we're fighting capitalism. All of that dialectic is gone. You're quite literally looking at globalists versus nationals or locals, or sovereigns, whatever you want to call it. And the globalists are in the West. They were never in Russia. And Russia doesn't want, no Russian politician is going to say, yeah, let's invade and annex Poland. Oh, yeah, and even better, let's just annex all of Germany. And maybe, yeah. Let's go to Lyons. Yeah, because I like Lyons. I've been there. Yeah, let's annex Lyons. Nobody's going to say that. And nobody wants it. That's the bloody problem here. There's no desire. Russian lands that are really ethnically Russian, undisputably haven't been mutated, totally mutated like Western Ukraine, pretty much. And if you take the line from Kiev and go all the way down to Odessa, that portion, that was old Nova Russia, those areas that were pseudo attempted to be forced Ukrainized by the communists back in the 20s. So yeah, but on the other hand, Russia has 1,000 years of Western invasions. So to scare Russians with war, it doesn't work. Okay, so most Russians have a fatalistic attitude toward it, anyways. Well, it'll be, it'll be. If I need to go fight, I'll go fight. Sure, okay, whatever. I don't want to go fight, but if I have to go fight, I'll go fight. That's the Russian mentality. And after 1,000 years of Western invasions, you're just expecting another invasion. The saying is every 100 years, the Europeans gather together in a fist and go invade us. And that's quite literally what people say. So that this just falls right back into that frame.
It's just like, the if we follow this, then what we are at is that we are now at, in front of an intensification of the war that's already been going on. And I originally I already did the thumbnail for this talk, and I wanted to call this talk here Russia's Endgame. And now I'm realizing probably I have to change my thumbnail, because it thinks that it's not an endgame. It's more something like we're at the brink of a Europeanization of this thing. Because if now it's true, then well, we're deeply effed, and there's no party that by themselves can de-escalate that. I mean, the Americans could, but again, it's it's the merchants of death, as they used to be called in the 1920s, when people understood what they were. That will prevent that. Plus, of course, this is a good thing, because you can throw Europe at Russia after Ukraine wasn't enough, and then you're gonna throw probably Japan, the Philippines, and Taiwan at China, and hope that that's enough to then finally break the core, right?
Well,
Because
it's not even about breaking the core. Look, if we're going to look realistically, what was the goal of the British in World War One? Everyone will say, "Oh, destruction of the German Empire." Yes, a goal. Second goal was destruction of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and the third goal, the destruction of the Ottoman Turkish Empire. Oh, and the fourth goal was destruction of the Russian Empire. See, if they're all falling apart, we get to pick up all the pieces. The British just got sucked into that. They did the same thing in World War II. I'm not defending Hitler, and Hitler would probably maybe gone east no matter what, because that was kind of something he was pushing. Yes, he was a madman, but the British were evil little bastards who were pushing Hitler as fast as possible to go to war with Stalin. Stalin was kind of, I want you to just go take care of them and maybe get bogged down there for a few years. And then France fell in like a couple months. Um, Nobody was expecting that. They figured the French would fight a little better than they did and the British too, than they did in Dunkirk and those areas. But the point is it was always the push to destroy Europe, and get it to at least Central and Eastern Europe to destroy itself, each other. And that hasn't changed. The British haven't changed. I mean, they're still playing the great game all over Europe and everywhere. Even though that they're a diminished little piss ant island that cannot even defend its own islands back down in the Falklands, because the Argentinians are kind of looking at it and go, well, that's a good time to take back the Falklands or the Maldives. The British can't come down here. They don't have boats that can come down here anymore. Their ships, they're the queen of the sea is barely the princess of the pond. They can't do anything anymore. So yeah, they're at that point, but they are still trying to play this game. They're still trying to be the great power and trying to push everybody else to go fight each other. The problem with mass formation that nobody wants to mention, when the German mass formation broke? When Hitler died. Resistance in Berlin collapsed when word of the Fuhrer being dead started to spread. The fanaticism of the Germans was so beyond all stupidity that, I mean, the last big German army was burning to death in the forest south of Berlin, where the Red Army, we had boxed them in and we're just bombing the crap out of them with incendiaries, just burning an army alive. And the rest of the German force, except the Hungarians were still fighting. There's some German units with the Hungarians, but that's a secondary front at that point. And then in the Czech, the SS were massacred in Prague. Russia had to throw an army group into that direction. Konev's, he threw a corps from Konev's army group that went from Berlin, and in 2 days was in Prague, driving the Germans out. But the main German forces were dead. They're done. They're gone. Berlin was surrounded. Berlin was being taken. They're fighting to the last, up to the point where they get the message that der Führer is tot. Oh, okay. Well, it's over then. And the mass surrenders begin. And then instantly you get these people that were psychopathic Hitler Jungen that suddenly go, oh, well, why the hell were we fighting for Hitler? That mass formation broke very, very quickly. And all these people that are anti-fascists were true believing fascists until the mass formation broke. But the mass formation had to be broken. It didn't break on its own. It would have got maybe over decades. It would have gotten away. Mass formation in the Soviet Union. It eased itself out through the terror and things like that. The purges. It was still pretty strong in the purges, but eventually the Soviet Union mellowed out in the late 40s and into the 50s and in the 60s. I mean, it had nothing to do. It wasn't even a mirror image of any form, distorted mirror image of what it was in the 20s and 30s. It mellowed itself, and maybe the Nazi Germans would have done the same thing if they'd won. Probably would have over time. Thank God they didn't win. We'd have to find that out. But the point is, the mass formation in its strength can only be broken by massive defeat. The defeat has to be so massive that there is no room left for the vast majority of people to have that foundation upon which you built the ideology that forced you into the war in the first place. You can't say Nazi Aryan superpower when Russian soldiers are walking down your capital city and are opening up soup kitchens to feed your population in what's left of your capital. Kind of hard to say we're the superior race at that point. You know,
Yeah, but the question is, how do we not have to get to that point, right? At least that's my question.
I don't think there is I don't think there's a way out. I don't want to say this. I prefer everybody, live friends, even if we put fences and don't look at each other, just live in peace. But I don't think there's a way out because you're right, there's a mass formation and it's a self-licking ice cream cone. It feeds on itself and it just grows in hysteria. I mean, there are elements in Germany, obviously, like the AfD, that may push back, but they may be destroyed as a party. Their future is very questionable.
It is, and even if it does become a governing party, I mean, what always happens for outsider party that become governing parties is that they get mainstream. They're sucked into what the middle 60% already are doing anyhow. So and then
So it with Front National.
flavor. They do it a little bit more right wing, right?
Yeah. We saw with Front National. They're now not against sending everything to Ukraine. Just not soldiers, not French soldiers.
It's what happens every single time. We saw it with the social parties of Europe back in the 20s and 30s. Once they became mainstream, they suddenly looked more like a left version of the middle and so on. And what happens with the populist parties? It does. So it's theologically really hard to go into reverse gear or to do a very hard turnaround. But good. I mean, now I'm sufficiently depressed again to usually, yeah, you have that way of ruining my weekends as we talk. Yeah, no.
We need to do this on Mondays, so you have to week. But the weekends, it's all calmed down. Look, honestly, I deal with it. It's whatever God wills. We put your trust in Him and do whatever needs to be done. Do I want war? No, we don't want war. Nobody wants war. But most Russians are now feeling themselves really backed up against the wall. The Europeans aren't calming down. They're not. They're doing the exact opposite. They're getting
Yeah.
more and more psychotic. They're
Yeah.
screaming louder. They're beating their chests harder, and they're getting stupider. Which is hard to imagine that the EU leadership would get any stupider. But they seem to be. I mean, look, they started talking about let's talk to Russia. Who's the number one candidate right now? Kaya Kallas. It doesn't don't even bother coming. Don't get on that plane. There's nothing to talk about. And you know how stupid this got? So Russia has a yearly ban on export of diesel during the planting season. And the planting season in Russia is 3 months. Because southern Russia, the planting season is mid, sometimes even early March. It's moved up by 2 weeks. The planet is getting warmer. I mean, we're actually getting back. It's not climate disaster. If you look at a long scale historical climate, we're at a very low point, and we're just starting to get back. We're not even close to the average of what the planet was for the last 48 million years. Let's just begin with that. We're still very low, and we're just getting out of a total disaster, almost wiped out all life on Earth because the CO2 levels fell. So yes, the planting, the planting season has advanced in the south. It's starting to get earlier, and the planting season in the far north, in the not the tundra, the taiga, those areas that produce a lot of wheat because it's
Mhm.
very wet and it's almost 18, 20 hours of sunlight. So it's a very intensive short growing period. That planting season is toward the end of May. So you get 3 months where and you got to have the buffer built up. So Russia for 3 months, historically for the last decade or so, does not allow any export of diesel to make sure that diesel stays in the economy and is cheap enough for the agrarian sector to utilize. Russia doesn't need a lot of fertilizer because of black soil, but it needs a lot of diesel. Well, the G7, when all of this started, so the G7, and there were articles about it, they didn't come hat in hand to ask Russia, can you sell some diesel? No, they came demanding you lift your sanctions. This is the mentality. We're going to talk down to you, you dirty white apes in the East, and we're going to tell you how you're supposed to be. Except those dirty white apes are sitting on top of everything they need. I mean, Russia could quite literally close itself off from the rest of the world and be fine. Uh, we produce most everything we need. We sure there's some bleeding edge technologies we don't have. The Chinese do, and they've shown themselves to be more advanced than the Americans. The photon chips. Have you seen that? The photonic chips that have 1,000 times faster speed than the best NVIDIA chips. China already has a line. It's going to be producing about 12,000 of them this year. It's a big breakthrough. You're using photons to send signals within the chip. Yeah, this is the spoiler technology to the AI data centers. They use a lot less electricity because they build up a lot less heat, and they're a lot more efficient.
Yeah.
So at this point, yes, the Chinese have certain bleeding edge technologies we don't, but for the most part, to survive and to survive well, the clothing industry in Russia hasn't fully recovered. So yes, we do import a few things of that. Some electronics we import. We make a lot of it ourselves. Refrigerators, washing machines. That's why we keep getting chips for missiles out of old washing machines.
Back when we're back to the narrative, and I think, I mean, we're at the 1 hour mark, so we need to kind of one down. But I think in conclusion, the sad like outcome of this discussion is either the Europeans break out of their mass formation, or the Russia is gonna break the Europeans, because that's the self-fulfilling prophecy we are already in now.
We are in a self-fulfilling prophecy that unfortunately, yeah, Russia will be just as fine. We'll just build a big wall. We'll forget that the rest of the European continent exists and we'll just look east. Fine, we can do that. That's not an issue. But the problem is the guys on the other side of that wall keep wanting to knock your wall down and march into your capital cities. And that's been the historical way of things for 1,000 years, quite literally 8,014 years. Because when Boleslav Hrabry invaded Kiev and Rus, he did it with his allies, the Holy Roman Empire.
114 years, right?
No, no, no.
Well,
1012. 1012 AD.
10, 12.
1,014 years.
Thousand.
And it's just been wave after wave after wave after that. Be it the Swedes, be it the Teutonics, be it Poles and various allies, and so on and so on. Even when we defeated the Mongols in the Kulikovo Polya, there were Swiss, by the way, there were Swiss mercenaries and Italian mercenaries fighting for the Mongols against Russia. And when the Poles grabbed, during the time of troubles, when the Poles grabbed Moscow twice, and the second time they were quite literally eating the population because they were besieged, it wasn't just the Poles. There was mercenaries and units from all over Europe as part of the Polish army. And it's just been continuous. So yeah, the Russia is not in a mass formation, but Russia is ever paranoid to some degree of looking westward, not looking eastward. We got invaded once from the east. That was the Mongols. Uh, Pretty much they left us alone after they burned our cities and conquered us. But as long as we paid the
Yes.
as long as we paid them the tax, they gave them levies for whatever campaign they wanted to wage next. and we just waited them out. Eventually, they broke up. But they didn't try to change our religion. They didn't try to change our culture. They didn't. And this whole thing, Russians are mixed with the Mongols, is crap. Either they didn't pretty much rape or pillage. They just, after the initial waves, they just sat back and they came in. If somebody didn't pay them the taxes, then they got whacked. But for the most part, Russia was vassals. The Russian states were vassals, all of them, different principalities. And as long as they paid the taxes and gave soldiers to the next campaign, live your own lives. We don't really care.
That's okay. Thank you very much. And we do have to continue this discussion again in a couple of weeks because I think it's very important to understand now at what dramatic point we are in. People want to follow your work. They should, of course, find you on your own YouTube channel.
Yep.
Slavic Man with a K, right?
Mr. Slavic Man.
Mr. Slavic.
All one word. All one word. X at Stanis Krapivnik. We can fit the whole name in. We Russians like long names. And then on Telegram, Stas Todaya Obratna is the Russian channel. Stas was there is the English channel. It only happens on SteamYard.
It's okay.
The Zoom slows down sometimes, but
yeah. Next time we go back,
SteamYard this time is going to be a StreamYard.
Yeah, next time we go back to Zoom. But I will put all the links to your channels into the description box below. So, Krapivnik, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.